In this art talk, I sit down with Paul C Lesch, an up-and-coming artist and dear friend who is in his senior year of study at Minnesota State University, Mankato. Take it away, fellows.
I'm Paul C Lesch, artist, printmaker, drawer, painter, all sorts, mixed media artist.
So why don't you go ahead and describe your overall style to someone who may have not seen any of your artworks before and want to know a little bit more about you.
Typically in my art, I used bold lines, bold colors, or my color choices are very thoughtful. Conceptually, I usually think about my dreams and more fictional items, kind of turning my glance towards the surreal rather than focusing on reality.
Okay, so what would you say was your background in art before MNSU? What kind of things did you do? Materials did you use?
Before MNSU, I definitely had a lot of sketchbooks that I kept as a kid. My parents would always get me sketchbooks to fill out. And so I have several of those, but I generally stuck to just pencil and paper or pen and paper, or essentially anything I could draw on. At restaurants, the napkins, and I always had a pencil handy, so I just did a lot of drawing up until college.
Very nice. So one of your more recent projects had to do with the medium cyanotype. Why don't you go ahead and describe some inspiration behind that project and the specific pieces overall?
So I went home to visit my parents and my grandparents, and I had this idea going through my head about how I grew up. I've been thinking a lot about my childhood and the sketches I've done and how much time I spent at home. And so when I was at home, I gathered several different plants, leaves, little artifacts from my parents and grandparents to kind of collect and create this design to put onto paper. I used several pine trees, evergreens. One of the centerpieces is my great-grandma's doily that she made herself, that my mom keeps in her room at all times. And then I colored it in with watercolor to kind of give it more of a pop, because the cyanotype is just blue and then you wash it out with and you get white.
How has attending MNSU impacted the direction your art has taken?
I definitely think about my art more professionally now, in a sense where I allow myself to take a step back and take the time to look at it from an audience perspective, because throughout middle school and high school, I always spent time being so close to the paper that I always kept it as a secret to myself, and I didn't take a step back and I didn't have that perspective. And so being at college and going through critiques and hearing these constructive criticisms and all these comments on my work has really helped me to be able to take a step back and look at my work in a more just like interesting way, different perspective.
What are you hoping to achieve with your art after you graduate?
I think just to continue making it is going to be the biggest challenge I'm going to face, because I have so many ideas that I want to pursue that it's hard to just focus in on one and hone in on one. So like just making stuff being the first step, and then I want to keep making work about the surreal and about my dreams and about very personal things, because I find that is something that motivates me, is talking about myself through my art.
How has your more recent art pieces differed from art that you might have made a year ago to even your childhood?
Now I am much more confident in the way that I create. A lot of times I would have those very like sketchy lines where you're just very unsure pencil strokes, brush strokes. I am much more bold in my subject matter. I talk about things that aren't typically talked about, like mental illness and the dark side of the world, the stuff that doesn't make the headlines. And I think that's just important stuff to talk about. And I have realized that growing up, and I'm not really so scared to have to want to share that.
Is there anything you would like anyone else to know more about Paul C Lesch, the artist?
The artist. I don't know. I will always talk about art. I think art is something that is so important to our society that it is very unfortunate that it is not just one of the basics of learning, because there is so much context to it for history. The caveman paintings, the old religious paintings. That's all art, theater, entertainment. The world is essentially, there's not a whole lot left without art, and so I love talking about it and spreading the word about just how fantastic art is.